Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, live the life we love. Don't forget to loaf and lube. All right, so it's Friday, it's my PowerPoint presentation day. This was entitled Quest. What is it to quest? To search for, to seek, um, to take on an arduous journey in some way. And so I'm starting off here with the idea of the mandala, that there is a center that radiates out symmetrically from that center to the circumference. And part of our search is to find the center under different guises. It's connected certainly to the hero journey, whether that accomplishment that the hero or the heroine does is a physical accomplishment, whether it's a spiritual accomplishment, it's still symbolic of our attempt to reconnect to the center, which is the origin of where all creativity, healing comes from. So it's symbolized by these many different images of quests, all of which I remember gripped me as a boy when I first read Mythology by Edith Hamilton. And that was before Joseph Campbell became popular. So there's something like Jason and the Argonauts trying to get the golden fleece. That's one idea of bringing back the boon, wresting it from the gods, and then offering it to humanity. One of my favorite, of course, is the story of King Arthur freeing the sword from the stone. If you remember that or not, that was a sign of who the true legitimate king of England. None of the knights or noblemen could do it. And then this boy just steps up and draws the sword out effortlessly. They knew that he was the one. And so from that, if you remember, he was the person who established the round table, brought the knights together, really coined the phrase of knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, K-N-I-G-H-T, which had to do with the nobility, chivalry, and defending the downtrodden, the oppressed, the damsel, and so forth. But again, freeing the damsel has to do with your own inner repressed beauty that has to be freed, not a woman having to wait for a man to do something. Then out of that comes the Holy Grail, the cup that supposedly caught Christ's blood, that had healing virtues. And it's interesting how this became a Christian symbol, though it was really taken from the pagan tradition of the cornucopia. And you get the story of the Fisher King who was wounded, and when Percival found his way to the Grail Castle, he didn't realize when he saw the king that he was supposed to intervene, but he was told when he was trained as a knight not to ask questions. So he held back on his natural inclination of compassion. And because he didn't ask, the castle disappeared. It took him another 20 years to get back there. And this time, of course, he did ask the question, what ails the uncle? And that's what brought healing to the kingdom. Now, another one is Galahad, right? His heart was pure, so his strength was like 10. But strangely enough, he was the bastard son of Lancelot and Guinevere. So that's interesting that only two knights that beheld the Grail, here was one who was born out of wedlock, which at that time was probably seen as a sin. And yet the purity of his own heart enabled him to see the vision that no one else could. Now, of course, when we go to the East, as a yogic person, the story of the Buddha represents one of those heroic journeys, the quest he was on for enlightenment. He did all the techniques, studied with all the gurus of his time, rejected them all, and then found his peace in front of the bo tree. That's a pretty fierce vow, according to the story. He said, may my bones turn to dust if I move from this spot before I'm enlightened. Fortunately, he didn't have to find out. All right, the wise men following the star, that was their quest. It led them to find the Savior, the little baby Jesus. This is another symbol of looking for that regenerative spirit, the thing's going to revolutionize your life, the one that's going to be the savior of your life, in this case, of all humankind. But as you know, crucifixion, or the sacrifice, or giving up your ego, or allowing yourself to be nailed to the material plane is one of the symbols as well. But why does the person enable themselves to do that? Well, it's because there's no resurrection. Something has to die for something to be born again. I'm sure that was an experience that a person couldn't believe. How is it possible that somebody comes back from the dead? Physically, we don't think so. Spiritually, now you understand. Moses in the Jewish tradition, revelatory. Okay, the bush speaks to you, the bush communicates to you. You didn't even know you were looking for it. That's the difference between seeking and revelation. In seeking, you're after something, even if you don't know what it is. But in revelation, it communicates to you. And that's how you get something like the Ten Commandments, or whatever is the code of conduct to guide a specific culture moving ahead based on what the deity reveals to the prophet or the high priestess or whoever gets the message. But you have to have a leap of faith, like in the Indiana Jones movie. And you got to take that first step into the apparent abyss before the bridge comes out and supports you. Even if you intellectually know, yeah, it's not until I take that first step that the bridge will be out there. But there's still the fear of like, will it really be there? So this is the leap of faith that we all have to make to believe these things are true internally. Remember, mythology is an artful arrangement of lies, totally false on the outside, totally true on the inside. Do you get that idea? The pot of gold. In the Irish tradition, the seeking of that will o' the wisp. If you can catch a leprechaun and catch his lucky charms, you'll be rich for the rest of your life. The Sundance in the Native American tradition, the quest of the warriors to bleed for the community in the same way that the women menstruate, so the men give blood also, renews their connection to the seasonal movement of the sun. The fountain of youth, the mythological search for that thing which maybe the Spanish thought it was about gold, but for other people it was about the regenerative quality, the alchemical quality of experiencing that timeless aspect of your own spirit, which revivifies you as if you were young again. In our day and age, the ayahuasca ceremony has been another quest, taking some sacred herb, the plant of the gods, the flesh of the gods, the entheogens, as they're called, different ethnic ways that people have of flipping their nervous system out of the commonplace and finding what's extraordinary about life. But I don't want to leave the women out, since most of the images that I use are almost all male-centered, because that's what comes easy for me. But I don't want to forget to acknowledge the women who have their own historic movements, their own quests, even if it's not mythological, whether it's Anne Frank reminding you of what it is to be untainted by the horrors of what you have to face, living in seclusion, even though in the end it does you in. Florence Nightingale set the trend of humanitarian service as a nurse. Betty Friedan, the first one to start, you could say, first wave feminism, speaking up against patriarchy and helping women to liberate themselves from stifling roles. Jane Addams, a person who took social services to the next level, taking care of homeless people, setting up education for runaways and disenfranchised in her day and age. Catherine Bigelow, one of the first women directors to win the Academy Award, especially when she did it like in Hurt Locker with a war story. Really interesting. And then the mythological Baba Yaga and Vasilisa, getting the fire from the witch, who'll eat you if you don't answer the question right. That's another heroic tale, questing to get the fire back, similar to like Prometheus, but here it's in a Russian fairy tale. And of course, Medusa as another example of the quest to not be turned to stone when you look at her in the face. And if you remember Theseus, he held the shield up so it reflected her face back to her and she turned to stone. But of course, for me, it'll always be the psychedelic quest that I learned from Timothy Leary when in my early days I experimented with LSD. So, whatever your quest is, honor that desire to get back to the center and believe in yourself no matter what. Don't quit. Don't give up. Keep on going. You didn't come this far only to come this far.